What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Going the Distance podcast presented by ImmaculateSports.com. Twitter's at ImacSports.
Instagram is also at Max Sports.
TikTok, YouTube, Immaculate Sports. It's episode 263. And a lot of crazy stuff going on with football, but really this episode is all about the postseason preview. We're going to go through the whole bracket plus many more stuff, quickly touch on some of the awards because specifically the AL MVP is going to be a really tough one to decide if you're a voter.
Yeah, definitely going to be a fun episode. I'd say about 95 to 99% baseball. So if you're looking for football stuff, just go ahead and look at next week. Obviously, there has been a ton of football stuff, so we're not saying that nothing's been going on there. But we feel like for the playoffs, a dedicated episode to baseball in the middle of all these dedicated episodes to football is probably fitting here with the playoffs. So we're looking forward to that. We're also going to do season grades for all the non-playoff teams. So all 30 teams will be talked about today, even the 43-119 Colorado Rockies. But yeah, we'll get right into it, and I'll let you go ahead and get it started with the opener.
Yeah, we're not talking much football, NFL or college, so I figured because it was the best thing I saw, I'll talk a little bit about the Week 5 college football slate. Even starting off on Friday, just amazing games all around. It felt like every time slot there was a must-watch game. Friday night, number 8 Florida State gets upset by Virginia in double overtime. That one was crazy. After that game, too, Arizona State won a really close game against TCU, so they're back in the conversation. Saturday morning, we had Illinois scored 34 points on USC and beat them in a close one. That was awesome. And we're not even talking about the games of the week, too. Trinidad Chambliss for Ole Miss. Chambliss, excuse me. It's a tricky one. He does not disappoint. They beat LSU and just destroy them in yards through the air and on the ground. Chambliss possibly in Heisman conversation. I don't think I'll have a watch this week. We'll wait another week, mostly baseball, but definitely a guy to keep your eye on. Alabama gets it done at Georgia. We talked about, that Georgia defense wasn't great. Is it enough for Alabama to win? Ty Simpson looked awesome. He's got a cannon. He was slinging it. And then the game of the week, Penn State, Oregon, double OT. Oregon gets it done. Penn State just really couldn't do much in the second half. They let Oregon get back there and blow it in double overtime with an interception, basically. So that's Week 5. I'll talk a little bit about Week 6 after baseball. Just an awesome week of college sports.
Yeah. For my opener, obviously the college football week was amazing. Waking up at 9 o'clock or whatever and turning on the USC-Illinois game was fun to watch as well, too. I thought that was a great game. But I'm just going to review my preseason picks that I had for baseball because I like doing that once the season's done. I know me and Skylar did that, just us two yesterday. And out of the 30 over-under choices that we had for win totals, I did go 18-12, which is pretty good. If you were to bet on those and they were all minus 115 picks, I think you come up plus 3.6 units or something like that. So pretty solid there. Award picks, I don't have the odds on those, but only a couple right, unfortunately. But two big ones, NL MVP and NL Cy Young, should be going the way that I picked them. Playoff teams, only 6 out of 12, so 50% is not exactly where I'd like to be. But Houston was a playoff team I had. I think if there was some less unfortunate injuries there, they definitely would have been in. But Kansas City and Texas, I maybe should have saw those coming as non-playoff teams a bit before. On the NL side, I got all three of my wild card teams wrong. Arizona, who had an interesting year pitching-wise. The Mets, who obviously had one of the biggest collapses that we've seen. And then the Braves, who just had a terrible year and dealt with a lot of injuries. We'll talk more about those teams in the future. So those picks, I wasn't terrible with. And then I had another tweet that I made in mid-March about pitchers I liked in 2025, kind of something that Foolish Baseball, a fun creator to watch in the sport, does every single year. I had Gavin Williams, who had a good year bouncing back from injury. Clay Holmes, who was pretty much a universal pick for people. I think he had a solid year. Max Meyer wasn't healthy for most of the season, but he showed some flashes. Mitch Spence for the A's, I thought looked really good in spring training. He did not have the greatest season for the A's. Been a good portion of the year in AAA. Michael Soroka was a pick I liked. He ended up having a pretty solid year in Washington before he got traded over to Chicago. I think I'd give myself a slight green on that pick. Max Kranick in the Mets bullpen had a pretty solid year when he was pitching, so I think that went good there. And then probably my worst pick was Michel Otanez, reliever for the A's. Came back from injury and just did not look as good as he did in 2024. So a big red on that one. But I do think I learned a lot this year. A lot of modeling, a lot of pitch stuff, stuff that I think I can translate into better picks next year. And that's why I love this part of the season, especially once the season is done, because we get all the speculation and you get to predict shit when it can't be wrong yet. And that's what makes it fun. So till next year with those preseason picks. But we got a lot of stuff to get into. Another thing, I have the Raider report to do because the Jets have not played yet. So I'm not going to make Skylar do that, which maybe could be a good thing. Maybe it's not, you don't want to talk about your football team because how the Raiders played yesterday, I don't know if I want to talk about them. Geno Smith, 14 for 21, 117 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and a loss to the Bears, 25-24 yesterday. Big story for the Raiders in this one is that Ashton Jeanty had his first big NFL game. So he was coming from, the depths of the depths in Boise State all the way up to the Raiders, as Spiro Dides or Adam Archuleta like to point out yesterday for some reason. Jeanty dominated, 21 carries, 138 yards, and a touchdown on the ground, as well as 2 catches for 17 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air as well, too. So a big day for the rookie. Brock Bowers, 5 for 46. Jacoby Myers, 4 for 30. Quiet day for Trey Tucker, 2 for 13. Honestly, solid Raider debut for Raheem Mostert. He had 4 carries for 62 yards. Every single run that he had was a chunk play, so that was cool to see there. Defense, I thought, balled out. Max Crosby had a dominant day. 3 passes defense, 3 TFLs, an interception, a forced fumble. He could be in line for a potential defensive player of the week here. Big story, I guess, for the Raiders is getting their field goal blocked at the end of the game, because if Daniel Carlson makes that or doesn't get blocked, he probably makes that, and Raiders are drastically in a different storyline than what they are right now, 1-3. Geno Smith, just too many turnovers, especially all of them happening on the Raiders side of the field, so all plus side possessions for the Bears off of that. Think we did a good job managing the run game, as you pretty much have every single game. And Caleb didn't have the prettiest stat line either, so I think we did a good job in making it rough for him defensively, but the offense just needs to do a bit more, specifically starting with the quarterback and Geno Smith, and having 6 interceptions in 2 games at home this year is just god-awful. So 1-3. The next game, I believe, is at the Colts next week, which will be interesting. After that, it's the Titans, so maybe things open up there, but back on to Tankathon is what it feels like, because that's how it is being a Raider fan. Anyways, moving on from that, unless you got anything for the Jets game.
Yeah, well, Justin Fields is back tonight, so that helps. Battle of the 0-3 teams. I hate Miami. If they want to beat Miami, they have to take the ball away. The defense has been horrible, and there's no more excuses. They're not playing Aaron Rodgers, Baker Mayfield, or Josh Allen. They really have to mess with Tua tonight, or they're going to be 0-4, season over.
Yeah, let's go Breece Hall. Anyways, moving on to player, pitcher, rookie in the week in the MLB. I guess we can kind of fly through these, being that it is kind of a partial week. But who is your player of the week, Skyler?
I'm going co-winners, maybe hinting at something for later. But no, it's not the MVP. I'm talking Seiya Suzuki and Michael Busch of the Cubs. They both kind of break out of slumps they had. Suzuki had 5 homers this week. Michael Busch had 8 hits, all extra base hits. So the Cubbies sweep St. Louis, and they get to host that wild card game.
Aaron Judge will be my player of the week here. He goes 9 for 20, 4 homers, 7 walks, and an OPS just under 1,700. So a big week for the potential MVP. That's already won multiple MVPs. So, he's won multiple, right?
Yeah.
Or does he just have one?
2017.
Does Altuve won that one?
Oh, right? My God, you're right.
Let me just make sure. Because it feels like he has 2.
That was the one that he should have won. That was 17. Wow.
2-time MVP. What was the other one? Oh, 22 and 24. Yeah. I was just somehow missing his 62 homer season in
Of
there. But
course.
regardless,
Of course.
um, that just shows how much we know. On to pitcher of the week, though.
Yeah, I'm going Christopher Sanchez. No deep cuts here. Who knows where the Phillies would be without Aaron Nola and him stepping up this week, especially Sanchez this month. 12 2/3 shutout, 14 Ks, and pretty good starts against Miami and Minnesota.
Yeah, Sanchez was dominant, but I did go Nick Lodolo for his two great outings over this past week. 7 1/3, 4 hits, 1 earned run, 12 Ks. Big part of why the Cincinnati Reds are playing in the playoffs.
Yep.
On to rookie of the week.
Colson Montgomery. He's been awesome for the White Sox. 10 hits, 3 more homers this week. The only reason to watch the White Sox this past month. But also shout out to McAble, the brand new twin. He shut down his former team over 6 innings.
Yeah. Colson Montgomery's my choice here as well, too. He goes 10 for 24, 3 homers, 6 RBIs, OPS at 1379. And then a shout out to three pitchers, Mick Gable, who you said, Cam Schlitter was dominant as well, too, in his starts. And then Shane Smith had a really good way to end out his rookie season with the White Sox as well, too. That brings us now to our season grades for non-playoff teams. There's 18 of them, so it might take a little bit here. But after that, we'll get into the playoffs and some award prediction stuff. We'll start off easy. We'll go with the worst record and go up from there. So the Colorado Rockies, 43 and 119. What do you grade the Rockies season?
I feel like I have to give them an F, even though I didn't have any expectations for them. It's just because this is one of the worst teams in MLB history. The only team to score under 600, and they also gave up over 1,000 runs this year. No one is even close to that.
Yeah, I think an F is the grade that you have to give them here. Even though the expectations were extremely low, there was just not a lot of positives. I think the biggest positive that they did get from the season was Hunter Goodman, 3.4 WAR All-Star season. He kind of breaks out there. But so many disappointing seasons from guys like Jordan Beck, Chris Bryant, Ezekiel Tovar, Brenton Doyle, Michael Toglia was a huge one. And then two of the prospects, Ade Alamador and Yanquiel Fernandez, both have a pretty rough go of it in the big leagues this year. And that's not even getting into their pitching side. That is probably the worst pitching staff that we've seen in a long time. The only pitcher I like on the roster had like a 6 ERA in Chase Dollander. For Dollander specifically, I think he'll be fine. It was just some really, really, really rude Colorado home splits for him. And once they somehow figure out pitching there, I think he could be pretty good. I also don't really see any future with this team because they're not going to get any free agent pitchers because no one wants to pitch in Colorado. So good luck lowering your team ERA there without doing stuff good from internally, and they don't really do anything good internally. Thought this year was supposed to be a year of growth for them and perhaps a star breakout for a guy like Tovar or Doyle, and we got none of that. So it's got to be an F for me, and I don't see this team really getting much better because of the division and just their prospects as well too don't excite me too much. Outside of Ethan Holiday, I think he'll be good, but that'll take a while. So an F for the Rockies. Now our second and last 100-loss team, the Chicago White Sox, that goes 60 and 102.
I gave them a D plus. I took their under this year. Things started off really slow, but after guys like Colson Montgomery and Kyle Teal came up, they started to look like an actual major league team. You mentioned Shane Smith too. So I didn't think too hard about it. They're still a disaster, but at least they're looking a ton better than Colorado. Maybe they could get into the 70s next season if they can hold on to their good players.
Yeah, this was a year of improvement for the White Sox. I don't think anybody had any expectations for this team, but they improved drastically in the win total. And we saw more good than what I originally thought would happen with the roster. Colson Montgomery kind of fizzled out as a prospect a little bit over the past year or so. He comes up to the big leagues and dominates 2.6 more in 71 games. Kyle Teal, a guy that they got in the Derek Crochet deal, he produces in his 77 games. Chase Mydroth, another guy I think can be a starter somewhere in the infield for them long term. And they also gave good runway for not some prospects, but some experiments. And Miguel Vargas and Curtis Mead. Maybe they don't
Yeah.
work out, but I think giving them a chance is the right thing to do. Pitching wise, as a whole, probably not the greatest thing, but I think they found a couple of guys that can reasonably start every fifth day for them, and Sean Burke and Shane Smith. And they also found a couple relievers, namely Grant Taylor, who I think could be useful in the back end of the bullpen. So still a long ways to go for this team, but I'm going to give them a C because I don't think it was that bad, and I think it was a very productive year in comparison to last year. On to the Washington Nationals, who went 66-96.
Yeah, I gave Washington an F. These guys are in some serious trouble, Kyle. Last year the story was, all right, everybody from the best pipeline in baseball is up. There's no more excuses. And then they're even worse in 2025. And outside of a few guys, I think this is a complete bust of a season. Obviously, you got James Wood to build around, and a lot of young prospects too. Gore, well, I don't know, dude. He started off so well and then finished like with a 4.5 ERA. So I'm not really sure about anybody other than James Wood on this team anymore. So I gave him an F. I thought they would be much better.
Yeah, I took the under for this team at 71 wins. I thought last year would be a bit more of an improvement than what we actually saw. And I feel like that prospect system became very thin rather quickly than what we expected it to be due to some kind of failings from guys like Brady House, Robert Hassel, whatnot. So outside of James Wood, C.J. Abrams, Dalen Lyle, who I liked, and Mackenzie Gore, I don't see a lot with this team. Dylan Cruz is a rough one as well too. He did have a very injury-riddled season, so I'm going to give him the extra life into next year, as I think obviously the Nationals will do. I'll give him a D plus. Maybe not as harsh as on them as what I should be, but I do think out of any team with 90 wins, they probably have the best group of young players to go with it. So I think the Nationals, they need to spin. That's probably the biggest thing. They've done it before, so I have some big kind of faith in that happening eventually. But a D plus for the Nationals this year. The Minnesota Twins, 70-92. I had on here probably the most likely team to fire their manager because I did my notes yesterday. They ended up getting rid of Rocco Baldelli. This one's got to be an F, right?
Yeah, don't get me wrong. This is just embarrassing as the Washington season, but I wrote in our season preview last season that I have no faith in the Twins because they've done nothing to set themselves up for the future. So, they have to trade their most important pieces, most of them at least. I know Byron Buxton's still there, but in my opinion, this year's is more of a shift in ideals than a complete collapse. So I didn't give them an F minus. I don't think it's the most embarrassing team in baseball, but they really screwed themselves last year.
Yeah, it's an F for me. 92 losses was way more than I expected to see with this team. Obviously, that had to do with their trade deadline, of course. One big positive is that we did get to see a healthy Byron Buxton season, and it was absolutely beautiful. He has a 5-WAR year, 35 homers, 24 stolen bases. But outside of that, the team was terrible on offense. Royce Lewis, Brooks Lee, Trevor Larnach all had really rough seasons. The bullpen was rough post-deadline. Joe Ryan and Pablo Lopez are obviously two big pluses on the rotation and huge building points. But I think their trade deadline was just so unnecessarily big. Like they had no reason to trade Louis Varland or even Griffin Jacks. I know they got Taj Bradley back for that, but I don't like what they did at the deadline. There's definitely probably going to be a bit of rebuilding here going on these next couple of years. I don't expect them to compete for a playoff spot, obviously with three other teams being above 500 in their division. But this was a year of failure for the Twins. I thought this could have been a playoff team.
They're going to be experimenting just like the White Sox.
Yeah. At least we got Buxton now. So.
Yeah.
On to the Pittsburgh Pirates that went 71-91.
I gave them a D grade. It's another team with very little expectations to begin with, so I'm not going to kill them. But they did get worse. And that Skeens timeline feels like it adds up more for him joining the Dodgers than doing anything in a Pirates uniform. And that's the main thing for me. I know that Henry Davis is able to play most days now as your number one overall pick. That's a pretty important piece to the puzzle, but I don't trust these guys at all. Good for the manager getting the extension. We'll see if Jared Jones comes back next year. That's about it for me with Pittsburgh, though.
Yeah, I give him a D. When I saw the over under total at like 78.5 this year, that was one of my easiest under picks out of any team. Some people had him as a sleeper, but I thought there was just such a big problem offensively that you couldn't have possibly thought this team was going to do anything in 2025. And I think the worst thing about 2025 is that they're going to leave it with the same problems that they had to begin the season, because they still didn't find a single offensive player that had over 2 WAR. I know Spencer Horwitz had a solid 100 games. O'Neal Cruz was decent in some moments. Joey Bart was solid when healthy, but I mean, the offense is just so bad. The good thing for them, though, is that the pitching is plentiful. Paul Skeens, obviously, Cy Young, Mitch Keller, good. Bubba Chandler, I think, is going to be really good. Braxton Ashcraft, I thought, showed some flashes. But I don't see this offense really improving, at least in the near future, until they spend or either trade Skeens or do something there to get something rolling on the offensive side. I think this is a really tough spot for them. If they do want to try to do anything in 2026 or even 2027, they do have a couple prospects that I like. Connor Griffin, of course, number one prospect. I think he's got. I don't want to put the label of Mike Trout on him right now, but I think there's definitely a reasonable comp there. And then Edward Florentino had a really good year in the minors as well too, but he's a bit farther off. So I think bridging the gap until they get up is going to be big, and I just don't know how in the hell they do that. It's a D for me. Rough year, but I just didn't have any expectations for them. Now the Angels, our last 90 loss win team, they go 72-90.
I gave the Angels a D plus. I think this is pretty much what everybody expected. I love Wash, but he has to leave halfway through the season, and then they get even worse. It was probably a mistake to bring him on in the first place, because this is just another wasted year for Mike Trout. Off topic, but I think they probably should have traded Trout to the Phillies 5 years ago. Maybe they would look much better in 2025. But Zach Neto is pretty much their only good player at the moment.
I do think the record shows a bit worse than what the season was. I thought there was some productive spots. Zach Neto's a big one. I think he finished with 3.7 WAR. Taylor Ward, 3 WAR season. Joe Adell found his way into like 36 homers or something
That's
like
true.
that.
I should mention him.
Nolan Shanwell, I thought, had a decent year. Didn't really turn out WAR-wise because he's a first baseman, but I thought it was okay. Big thing, Mike Trout was mostly healthy, which is cool to see. I think this is the most that we've seen him play games-wise in quite a while. The rotation isn't terrible. It's got some good starters. Jose Soriano and Yusei Kikuchi, I think, are both like solid threes. And one of the cool stories with them was Reed Detmers, the reclamation project for him in the reliever spot, was executed really well. And I think he's going to be a big-time reliever, especially when Ben Joyce comes back next year. I expect the Angels to try to, make some big move this offseason, because that seems to be what they always do. It'll probably be a move that fails and makes them look stupid again, but I can't fault them for trying. So I'll give them a C-. I thought it was a solid year. I think if they make the right moves, this team could be pushing 500 next year. On to Baltimore, that went 75-87.
It may be harsh, but in my opinion, this is an F season. Yeah, they had no pitching, but they still finished behind 2 other AL teams that don't even have a home right now. And many people, including me, had them back in the postseason. Unfortunately for them, it looks like they're about to hit another rebuild or retool, depending on who they decide to keep around. And Adley Rutschman, number 1 pick, is a big part of that. If he's gone, I think we're going to see a whole new transformation to this lineup, because they need to do something to help the pitching staff.
Yeah. This is an F. It's a complete wasted year for a team that doesn't have a high payroll. That's because they neglected pitching in the offseason. Big one, of course, letting Corbin Burns walk in free agency. Corbin Burns, we know, got Tommy John, but I think if they tried to do anything long term with him, that definitely could have helped the long term situation. Kyle Bradish and Grayson Rodriguez injuries were unfortunate, and they missed most of the year, but still, your Band-Aid fix on pitching to sign Charlie Morton at 42 years old was just not the way to go about it. They did deal with a ton of injuries on the offensive side. Gunnar Henderson was hurt on opening day, and that's about it. He came back after that. But Jordan Westberg, Adley Rutschman, and Colton Cowser all missed significant chunks of the season and didn't produce quite the way that people expected them to. And I think the clock is really ticking now for this team. It's not like Adley just came up a year ago. He's very close to free agency now. Gunnar Henderson is approaching rapidly. I think, there's a real chance that they blow it up this year. Do I want to see that? No, because I still feel like this core has a chance to do something. But, just a couple years ago, we thought the Orioles were going to be here for a long, long time, and they are not, which sucks to see. So it's an F for me, and I don't really see this team being up on the up of the ups in the coming future as well, too. I think it's starting to trend downward. On to Atlanta.
Atlanta, I gave a D minus. A very similar situation to Baltimore, I think. The injuries were brutal, and I did take their under, but I did not expect 76 wins. I mean, shit, man. The Houston Astros had more injuries than they did, and they won 87 games. So I'm not going to take the excuses here. This was a terrible season from Atlanta, and they were fun to watch when Acuna was playing well at the end of the year. But outside of that, this was absolutely brutal. The good thing is they have a lot of really good young players.
Yeah, I give them a D. I do give them a bit of a pass on the injuries, especially on the pitching side, because Sale, Schwellenbach, Strider, Grant Holmes, AJ Smith-Shawver, and Reynaldo Lopez all missed significant chunks of the season. And that's 6 starters right there. And that doesn't even include Hurston Wallstrip, who only started 10 games, and some other guys as well, too, that can be some solid starters for them. But that doesn't, improve or change anything that was a fact about the offense, and that Austin Riley, John Murphy, and Ozzie Albies just did not produce this season. Michael Harris had a really bad first half that kind of made the entirety of his season look bad. Obviously, Matt Olson's a consistent, 130 WRC plus and 162 games played. Ronald Acuna, when he's healthy, is such a fun player to watch. But outside of those two guys and finding a big positive in Drake Baldwin, this is a really rough year. The good thing for them is that I don't really think they need to do much to be back in playoff contention for 2026. If those pitchers get healthy, Schwellenbach, Strider, Holmes, Smith-Shawver, like those 4 specifically, they're still young. I think there's a good chance this team gets back to playoff contention in 2026. And I think a lot of people are going to feel that way as well, too, once we get to March next year. Now getting to the other 76 and 86 team, a fun one to talk about, our A's.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I gave the A's a B minus grade for this season because I can't complain. I think this is definitely considered a passing grade type of season for the A's. And not every team finds diamonds in the rough quite like the A's can. So I'm really excited for the future of Nick Kurtz, Jacob Wilson, Lawrence Butler, and many more prospects that will be coming up soon. But let's go get some pitching so we don't end up like Baltimore. If they don't go 1-19 over that stretch, things are looking very different. Maybe they challenge Houston a little bit more. But it's hard to be upset. I'm going B minus.
Yeah. So if that 1-20 stretch that they went on in May and June turned to a 10-11 stretch instead, still not great, but just one game under 500, this team would be 85 and 77. So that can change, other divisional teams' record as well too, because I don't exactly remember who they played during that 1-20 stretch. You take a couple wins away from them, add them to us, and it looks a whole lot different. But regardless, this is a huge year of growth for this team, and a bigger year for growth than what we've seen in a long time for this A's franchise. Nick Kurtz, Jacob Wilson, Tyler Soderstrom all have big years. Kurtz specifically looks like he could be a potential MVP type guy, which is, I don't even want to say out loud because of how ridiculous that sounds, but it feels real through his first 120 games in the big leagues. Shea Langoliers had a phenomenal year, 31 homers as a catcher, hit 861 OPS. That is just phenomenal. Brett Rooker is about as consistent as a bat as you can find in the big leagues at an 800 OPS. You'll take that every year, 30 homers, 85 plus RBIs. You don't see a lot of guys like that in the big leagues. Lawrence Butler, who struggled a lot this year and went through a lot of growing pains, still found himself with a 2.0 WAR year, 20 homers, 20 stolen bases. And they also added a top 5 prospect in all of baseball, and Leodalus to Prize, and we think that he could be, a franchise changer when he's up in the big leagues. The pitching side definitely was a struggle and killed this team in the first half. And that's why they didn't make the playoffs. But it was honestly a strength for this team in the second half. Severino and Springs weren't great, but they weren't bad either. They served their roles in the first year with the team. I think they found a ton of potential starters in Jacob Lopez, JT Ginn, Luis Morales, Jack Perkins, Mason Barnett. If just one or two of those guys pans out to be plus arms, there is zero doubt in my mind that this is the 2026 playoff team. Like, absolutely zero doubt in my mind. In the offseason, what do?
Nothing.
I hope they find a way to lock up Kurtz or Wilson. That would be cool. I just don't know what the price tag looks like on that. If we could offer some sort of like Cal Raleigh-esque deal to Shea Langoliers, maybe a tier below that, but something along those lines would be good because he would be the first guy out of any of these guys to hit free agency. So I think we could deal with him and kind of lock him up and kind of reset his timeline back to these guys and Kurtz, Wilson, Soderstrom. I think you're looking at a good spot there. Maybe you could add a third baseman or a second baseman in the short-term fix. I know there's a couple guys out there that could be, big hitters, even though they might not cost a ton. And then pitching, I mean, if they want to go sign Framber Valdez, fuck yeah. Like, I'd be all down for that, but that's not going to happen with this team. I'd look more relievers, try to find guys to complement Elvis Alvarado, Hogan Harris, Tyler Ferguson. Like, there's some solid arms in the back end, but I don't think there's that bona fide closer yet, of course. So I think they can go ahead and try to find somebody there. And if they do that stuff, like 90 wins should be a breeze for this roster next year if that happens. Because this team was one of the best teams of baseball in the second half. So I give it a B. That 1-20 stretch is going to kick me for a long time. Because this team would have been like super close to the playoffs, but that didn't happen. Maybe we would have changed the trade deadline. Who knows? Maybe that 1-20 stretch helps us in 4 years because we don't have Miller. We have Leo DeFries instead, and he turns into however good he is. But regardless, it's a good year for the A's. They give him a B. One of my higher grades out of any team that we're going to talk about today. So now that monologue's over, we'll get into the Tampa Bay Rays, who were one game better at 77 and 85.
Yeah, I gave Tampa Bay a C+. Another team that I can't really rip on too bad because they played in a brand new ballpark for the first time, and they had no real shot at the division from the jump because they had no McClanahan to start the year. But the thing about Tampa Bay is they're always a pain in the ass to play. And even though they were under 500, I think this is a positive step forward, specifically Caminero. That dude is a superstar.
Yeah, it's an interesting year for the Rays. I don't think anybody, or maybe some people, but we didn't have them as a playoff team to start the year. Then, halfway through the year, they kind of looked like a playoff team. And then at the end of the year, again, they just didn't look like a playoff team. Good thing for them. They found a couple studs. Junior Caminero, Jonathan Aranda, I think are going to be mainstays in that lineup for a long time if they find a way to lock them up contract-wise. Yandy Diaz and Brandon Lau are consistent, solid bats that they have. Maybe they even, look to move those guys because that's what the Rays do. The two negatives, Josh Lowe, Christopher Morel, they both struggled this year in their limited playing time as well, too, dealt with some injuries. So those two guys are unfortunate. The pitching side is about as crazy. Yeah, pitching side is about as crazy as it could possibly be. They have three 2+ WAR starters in Rasmussen, Shane Baz, and somebody else I can't think of right now. They got multiple strong back end guys. I love that they traded for Pepioid. That's who it was. Um, I love that they traded for Griffin Jacks. I know he didn't have the greatest year ERA wise, but he has some ridiculous stuff. I thought this year, quick retool. They did some necessary things. They brought up some fun prospects, Carson Williams at the end of the year. I think they got some fun guys in the minors as well too. And I believe they should, be back to changing 77 wins to 86 wins, just like that next year, and competing for a playoff spot again. Next up, the St. Louis Cardinals. Oh, C- for the Rays, by the way, is what I got. St. Louis Cardinals, 78 and 84.
I'm giving St. Louis a C. They were slightly better than I thought they would be, but still pretty average. They just couldn't score enough runs to hang on in the Central, which was a better division than most people expected. But luckily for them, the one thing their new baseball operation specialist, whatever you want to call him, Heim Bloom, is going to be running the show now. He's pretty good at finding cheap contact hitters, and this is another team I expect to completely rehaul that lineup. They have some good veteran pitchers. I've been like slamming the table on them to sell the veterans, but they're still going to try to go 500 every year. So, hey, at least they're bringing in a baseball operations guy that's good at winning 81 games.
Yeah, Cardinals. I'll give a D plus. I'll get the grade out of the way first. I thought they saw some pretty solid offensive seasons from young hitters in Mason Wynn, Ivan Herrera, Alec Burleson, Victor Scott. Got consistent seasons from the Betts and Brendan Donovan and Wilson Contreras. Nolan Arenado's washed at this point, but we kind of knew that. Big negative was Jordan Walker. He officially looks like a bust in my book, even though he's got ridiculous bat speed. He just can't seem to hit the ball, which is a big problem, of course, in baseball. So I think it's time we label him a bust unless he goes to the Rays and figures it out or something like that. Pitching staff was once again led by a solid Sonny Gray season. Big plus for me was Matthew Liberatore. He saw his most productive season as a big leaguer and pitched 150 innings, which was huge. Outside of those two guys, not much good in the rotation, though. I still hate Miles Michaelos. Think
Lizard
he's VP
King.
regardless. I do think they did a good job in the bullpen post-Helsley trade. I thought that trade could have been a big fault for them. But Matthew Swanson, Riley O'Brien, and Kyle Leahy all turned into, I think, 7 or 8 inning guys. Still, like, this team is way older than these other teams that we've talked about, except for maybe like the Twins and Atlanta. This team should have been a team going 84 and 78 instead of 78 and 84. And I know it doesn't really change much in the grand scheme of things, but
It would have this
I don't
year.
think this. Yeah, I don't love this team, so a D plus for me. Moving on to one of the higher grades we'll probably give, the Miami Marlins. They go 79 and 83. This has got to be some sort of A season, right?
Yeah, so I gave them a B plus. I felt like if you're on this list, probably didn't deserve an A. But I tell you what, they smashed the original win total they had of 63, and they were a really fun team to watch this year. Other than the A series they played in, I think, but a lot of young guys stepped up this season. We don't even well, you probably will. I don't even need to talk about the pitching and talk about it every year. Excellent group of prospects, and the bats. So many guys stepped up. The one thing I wanted to see was Griffin Conine be a part of that, and he was hurt the entire year. But as soon as he came back, they went on another win streak. So maybe he will stick around, be in that starting lineup. So yeah, I gave him a B plus. I like watching the Marlins for sure.
Yeah, this is a fun team for me to watch. I found myself watching the Marlins probably way more than I should have this year. I give them an A. Way better than expectations. Like, complete what a season for them. Kyle Stowers, 4.0 WAR in 117 games. Jacob Marcy, 2.2 WAR in 55 games. So potentially two big outfielders that they find there. Middle of the infield duo, Xavier Edwards and Otto Lopez. Maybe not the biggest bats, but their defense carries the way, and their speed is well too. And I think they're a very productive up the middle duo. Roberto Hernandez was a fun story in his productive 87 games. And I think they turned a lot of like, are you really playing him into solid players this year? And I didn't expect that at all from the Marlins. A big plus to Peter Bendex, especially on this pitching side, even though it was good as we expected with them a bit more. Edward Cabrera and Yuri Perez are both going to be frontline starters. Sandy Alcantara obviously dealt with some stuff early in the year, but he battled through a rough season. Jansen Junk, he led their pitchers in WAR at 2.5, which I find ridiculous, but that's because of his like 1.06 walks per nine or something like that. So he was no nonsense and pitched well in his 110 plus innings with the team. Max Meyer, Ryan Weathers, I think both look solid when healthy for them. Just a big question for them is health. And the bullpen arms flashed. Ronnie Henriquez, he broke out big time in the back end of the bullpen. He's a very interesting guy to watch. I think he's legitimately like 5'10", 165, I think is what he's listed as, but he hits 99, 98, and obviously comes from a funky angle because he is so much shorter than the average pitcher, average closer in the big leagues. They have a good amount of prospects. My biggest thing is I still think they outperformed expectations from a statistical aspect as well too. That I think an improvement in their win record next year might be tough to do because they just were so good on the statistical side, or outperformed their expected stats way better than most teams did. So I think if they push 500 next year like they did this year, I think it'll be a good year. I don't expect them to, hop into a playoff spot next year or something like that. So an A season for them, fun team to watch. And man, do Mets fans fucking hate them. I don't know if you saw the post game of Gary Cohen, Keith Hernandez, and Ron Darling. The Marlins took a team photo after the game, and Ron Darling was so pissed. He's like, they didn't even make the playoffs. Yeah, what are they doing?
He was pissed the entire week, dude. It was hilarious. Every game I turned on.
Yeah, we'll talk more about the Mets here in a few minutes, but we'll move it over to the Arizona Diamondbacks, who go 80-82. It's the last under 500 team that we'll talk about.
I gave Arizona a C+. The pitching was disastrous again, but they ended up right there in the wild card race at the end of the day. So I think this is another team that could be right back to where they were last season, just like Atlanta. Despite having to sell guys off, pretty good guys at the deadline, they got their shit together. So, maybe a couple trades wasted, but they have assets for sure. Perdomo is a potential superstar too. I know we were kind of confused, like, wait, another shortstop's getting a big deal. What's going on? But the lineup is fine with Arizona.
Yeah, Arizona was fun. A team I enjoyed watching a lot too, partially because they're on the West Coast and there's less games in those slots. But I'll give the D-backs a D, kind of fitting with their team name, I guess. The offense was not the problem. We know that. Big-time years for Geraldo Perdomo, Corbin Carroll, Ketel Marte, and Gabriel Moreno when he was healthy. Specifically, Geraldo Perdomo and Corbin Carroll, like superstar-type seasons. And I don't think I could have thought that in a million years with Geraldo Perdomo. I don't know if he got to 100 RBIs, but he was super, super close to it. Outside of those four, I do think there were some tough spots, especially in the second half. But you can expect that when you trade Suarez and Naylor, you're going to be playing some quad A guys for the rest of the year at that point. Pitching was way worse than I expected, and definitely was the fault of this team. Ryan Nelson being really the best starter on this squad was not something I expected. Brandon Pfaadt, Eduardo Rodriguez, Zach Gallen all struggle. Corbin Burns goes through Tommy John. I do think the good thing for them is that those guys probably bounce back. Pfaadt, Erod, and Gallen, I think, all can post solid stuff, even though I think Gallen's a free agent now at this point.
Yeah.
I see this team bouncing back to, 85 wins next year, especially if they make some moves, they could get up to 90. I think it definitely, be a force for teams like the Padres. But there's a lot of help needed on the pitching side, especially in the back end of the bullpen. I don't really see a ton of those guys being, impact arms. So it's a D for Arizona. Just a waste of the phenomenal years from Perdomo, Carroll, Marte, and Moreno. On to Texas, which was pretty much the exact opposite of the Arizona Diamondbacks. They go 81-81. What do you think about the Rangers?
Yeah, I gave Texas a C minus, and just like you hinted at, I'm starting again with the pitching here because I think the craziest part of the Ranger season was that Jacob deGrom threw almost 200 innings this season, and they still ended up at 500. I had these guys back in the postseason, so I can't give them a better grade than C minus. I won't kill them though, but what in the world are they doing with some of these contracts? Nathan Eovaldi got hurt right after his extension. Basically, Seager and Semien were benched. I mean, I know they were banged up all year, but they were basically benched for the last month. That's how bad things were.
I'll start with pitching because that was their strength, which we did not expect with this Rangers team. Eovaldi, Jacob deGrom both have mostly healthy seasons, which is cool to see. That's like Tyler Mahle and Patrick Corbin both have good years kind of out of nowhere. Jack Leiter, 2.3 WAR in 29 games started in his first full season in the big leagues. Their makeshift bullpen, which I didn't like in the preseason, turned out to be solid. I think the only real negative on the pitching side was Kumar Rocker not figuring out this season. But maybe he could do something in the future. Who knows? Maybe it's a bullpen role. The lineup, though, just so underwhelming. They got solid seasons from Wyatt Langford and Corey Seager, both 4 WAR years. And Evan Carter was good when he was healthy, which wasn't often. But Semien, Smith, Young, Garcia, Berger, Heim, Peterson, all just terrible seasons offensively. And when you have that, like, what do you expect? This team wasn't going to make the playoffs with that. Even going 81-81, I think, was overachieving. I give it a D minus because they dealt with a lot less injuries than other teams. Still had like the on paper value of their roster and still found a way to not make the playoffs. So a rough year for them. I give them a D minus. Now the other 81-81 team, who fired the manager, the San Francisco Giants. What do you think about them as they do their typical 81-81 year?
Yeah, since they were right there at 500, I'm going to give them a C plus. I don't feel great about it, but this was one of the teams that I didn't really think would do much more than what they did last season. And I don't know, maybe it's just me. It's really hard to figure out what the Giants are thinking. So I'll just get into this. Right. The new additions clearly helped them out this season, but they got destroyed by their division. And the Bob Melvin situation holds back their grade, I think, too. I think they are trending upwards. They finally have some power in the lineup for the first time in forever since Barry Bonds was there. But things are a little off about them. I really wonder who their manager is going to be because they don't have a good bullpen. And most good Giants teams need that. That's part of their identity, and they don't. Bob Melvin couldn't figure it out, so I don't know who will for this next season. I'm going to give them a C plus, though, because I think they definitely could have fallen apart a lot earlier in the season, and they still made it to 500, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, the Giants are an interesting team. Start off with the lineup. I thought it was actually pretty solid. Willy Adames got heavily shit on first like 2 months in the Giants uniform, but I think he ended with a good season. 4 WAR years, solid for a shortstop. Matt Chapman was good when he was healthy, as we expect. Rafael Devers, good when he was playing for them, which he did every single day. Pat Bailey, Jung-Hoo Lee, Elliot Ramos, all I think had pretty slightly underwhelming seasons from the plate, but still solid nonetheless. And they didn't really have too many failed seasons offensively, which was good. Wilmer Flores had a rough year, but who cares? Like, he's going to be moved off. Bryce Aldridge is going to be coming in there, and you'd expect him to do something. I do think they rushed him a little bit to the big leagues, but they'll be fine with that. Pitching was good as well, which is kind of funny. Logan Webb, Cy Young-esque season. Justin Verlander and Robbie Ray were both good. Young guys like Landon Rupp, Hayden Birdsong, and Kai Wei Tang all showed some stuff that made you believe that one or two of them could stick in the rotation long term. And I think there's a couple arms in the bullpen. Maybe the statistics going to work out the greatest for some of them. But Randy Rodriguez, Ryan Walker, and Joel Peguero, I think, are all guys that can definitely stick in that bullpen there. And if you just look at the stats and don't look at the wins and you try to predict, where this team finished, I think you'd probably say this is a playoff team. The only problem for them is that I don't know how much they're going to add in the offseason because they just added Rafael Devers in his huge contract. They just signed Matt Chapman to a big deal. They just signed Willie Adames to a big deal. Robbie Ray's got money on the slate. Logan Webb's got money on the slate. And they got needs to fill. They had a whole bunch of just around league average hitters, and I don't think you win too much with league average hitters. And with Justin Verlander being 55 years old, you're going to need to add a starter too. I give him a D- just because I think when you have, all these productive seasons and you don't make the playoffs, it hurts that much more. This was a team geared to make the playoffs as well too. When you look at Adames, Chapman, Devers, Ray, Webb, like they had so many veterans that you would think would be part of the playoff team. And they just didn't get there. Some people say it's the manager. I don't think it will be the manager. I know a lot of Giants fans hope Bruce Bochy's getting out there, but that's a
No
long
way.
fucking walk for him to make from the dugout out to the pitcher's mound. And I don't know if you've seen that guy walk, but it's not good. So I know Buster Posey's going to try to pull something. Maybe he hires Baumgartner to be the manager or something. But nostalgia is the biggest problem with this team, I think. They're trying to be something that they're not. D-. On to the Royals. Over 500 teams now with their last three. The Royals go 82-80 and just missed the playoffs.
I gave Kansas City a C, and I view this team very similarly to San Francisco. They clearly have elite players spread across the roster. When I saw them play San Francisco in May, they looked like an elite team. And at the time, they were right next to Detroit. But things fell apart very quickly for them. And you just can't ask the pitching staff to save them every single night. This is one of the few teams, I think, that will bounce back. But eventually, you got to look at what kind of window you have. And if they did have some sort of competitive championship window open last year, that closes very quickly if you keep losing to Detroit and Cleveland. But the reason I'm not going to kill Kansas City and San Francisco is because they're keeping everybody together for one more year. So I am going to keep that window slightly open. I gave them a C. I think there's a chance they could win 87 next year.
I'll start off with the offense for Kansas City. Another MVP caliber season for Bobby Witt, in which he won't win the MVP and won't be second either, which is crazy. Probably the biggest surprise from this team, Michael Garcia, great year, offensively, defensively, running the bases. All three levels, as NFL coaches would say, all five phases, all five tools was dominant for Michael Garcia. Posted a really good season there. Solid years from Vinny Pasquantino and Salvador Perez kind of as well too, even though it didn't show up war-wise. Fun, but super small sample size for prospect Carter Jensen. Definitely could be the future there at the catching position. Rough debut from Jack Caglione, but definitely still some time and runway with him. The biggest reason why I think this team didn't make the playoffs was the Jonathan India trade just did not work out at all. He posted a negative WAR. Brady Singer, even though the Royals rotation was solid, would have been a big help to this team if they had him. I know I was a big advocate for that trade. I thought it was a win-win trade when it happened, but yeah. India just didn't produce, and that was the problem for them. Moving to the pitchers, rotation was as good as you'd expect, even with a rough year from Seth Lugo, and that's because Chris Bubich and Cole Reagans both stepped up to all-star level type pitchers, even though they dealt with injuries. They got really good veteran seasons from Michael Wacha and Michael Lorenzen. And Noah Cameron and Ryan Berger, both solid rookie campaigns that they had. Back end of the bullpen is also very strong. Urseg and Estevez. Somehow I think we're back to the same thing as last year. They just need to do another pitcher-hitter swap to get an outfielder, and this should be a team competing for the playoffs next year because that's how close they are. They have the MVP type player. They have a good supporting cast around him. They have top tier pitchers, top 10 back end bullpen guys, and that's really what a makeup of every playoff team is. So I think the Royals should be there soon. I give them a C minus because it's really just the India trade to hurt them. On to the Mets. They go 83 and 79. Fun season, but also a disastrous season from the Mets.
Yeah, I'm not afraid to give them an F for this season. They blew a massive lead in the division. They added a bunch of rentals that didn't work, and it just all came crashing down right when they needed to win a couple games. Now Pete Alonso might be leaving, and many more. Luckily for them, they've got a ton of money, but going back to the window, you don't get that big of a window when it comes to baseball. Things change very quickly in this game. And if they don't go get somebody to replace Pete Alonso, I think they may be in some serious trouble because their pitching staff, going back to that too, you can't throw a bunch of rookies out there. This isn't the 2012 A's like that. That's the last time I can remember this working. Throwing 4 rookies and a 40-year-old out there and making the playoffs. That's just basically impossible. So I gave him an F.
Yeah, I'll start off with the offense as I usually do. Lindor and Soto both produced phenomenal seasons. Despite the choke, I don't think you can put any blame on those two guys. They were great. Pete Alonso, Brandon Nimmo, Jeff McNeil have their typical good, solid seasons. Big power from Alonso, a bit of everything from Nimmo, and Jeff McNeil, solid year after having a rough couple of years. Brett Beatty and Francisco Alvarez both do well with their opportunities. I think you saw productive seasons from them. What hurt them offensively was Ronnie Mauricio not producing that well, Mark Viento struggling, Luis Angel Acuna really just not having any pop at all. Jesse Winker, Jose Siri as well too. Two guys they brought in within this past year have injury seasons and missed the vast majority of the season there. But regardless, it's not the fault of the offense. Even in the past 2 months of the season, I think the Mets had one of the best WRC pluses of a team and any team in the big leagues. It was all the pitching's problem during this collapse. And that's why we were so shocked in the first couple months of the year when the Mets had allowed the least runs in the league. We're like, this is going to fail at some point because Clay Holmes and David Peterson leading your rotation is not the way things should be. And that's how it was. And no fault on those two guys because they had solid years. But Tyler McGill, Kodem Senga, Frankie Montas, Sean Manaea, they all deal with injuries and don't produce when healthy. And that was the problem there for them. I know they brought up McLean, Tong, and Sproat. Maybe a bit early for Tong and Sproat, but I thought both those dudes will be there long term. McLean looked great in his short sample size. I think he'll be there long term as well too. Edwin Diaz, great in the back end. Outside of that, I don't think their bullpen was that great or that bad either. Obviously, leads into the free agency. What are the Mets going to do? We know that they're going to spend money. Will they bring back Pete Alonso, Edwin Diaz, guys like that? Who knows? But they'll bounce back if they do. If they do bring them back, so it's an F for the Mets, of course, because they can't miss the playoffs with that high of a payroll. But the sky isn't completely falling because they'll be back next year. And now the last team that we had that didn't make the playoffs, the Houston Astros, they go 87 and 75.
I gave the Astros a C plus. It was the same grade I gave Tampa Bay and Arizona because I felt like they were a really good team for most of the season, but they also blew a pretty big lead in the division. They just couldn't break away. And it's hard to win 85 plus games with all the shit they had to deal with. Yordan Alvarez barely played. So I'm going to give them a pass. Things get interesting when we get to the offseason. They've already moved off of Kyle Tucker, so they don't got to worry about that. Maybe they could go pick somebody big up, but history tells us maybe not so in the lineup. The pitching was excellent, at least in the top end of the rotation under Brown, Valdez. 87 wins and no playoffs is rough, man. It kind of seems like an incomplete type of season, but I am going to give them the C plus.
Just one too many injuries is the problem for me here. Pena, great season, but misses close to 40 games. Paredes, good season, but misses 60 games. Jordan misses 100 games. Chas McCormick misses close to 100 games, and it wasn't enough to offset Jake Myers, Mauricio Dubon, Jose Altuve, Yander Diaz's solid seasons because they were really the only guys out there. Carlos Correa did come in and I think produced well in his 50 games, but that still scares me in the long term. I don't know how that's going to look in 5 years from now. Christian Walker, his first year for the Astros, thought was going to be a big success. Was not a big success. And Cam Smith underperformed what his expectations were going into the season. Even though that was probably, the run scored, runs allowed fault of the team, I think the pitching was definitely hurt. I know Hunter Brown and Framber Valdez dominated, and the back end of the bullpen was good as usual. But I said this at the deadline. They had some pitching problems that they needed to fix in the back end of the rotation, middle of the bullpen, and they just did not address it, and instead chose the nostalgic route to go get Carlos Correa, and that hurt them. If they, instead of trading for Carlos Correa, gave up the farm system to go get Joe Ryan or somebody like that could really move the needle in the rotation, they're playing in the playoffs right now, and for that reason, the issue being so visible to me, I give them a D- because it was so close for them to make it right. And if this team is in the playoffs, they have a chance to do anything. We've seen it in multiple years. So the Houston Astros get a D- for me. And with a pretty mid farm system and Framber Valdez now being a free agent, shit might be hitting the fan for the Astros, which, hey, I'm not complaining, but yeah, it's kind of rough for them. D-. That brings us to our quick MLB rewards final pick. We don't want to be here for another hour and a half, so we'll just kind of not fly through, but we will go through our picks for the MLB awards. We'll do it like the award show, so we'll go from the back. Starting off with the managers of the year. Who do you have for the AL and the NL?
All right. So for the American League, I think John Schneider is the right pick over Dan Wilson here. I think this was the more surprising rise to first place in the entire league. So I'm thinking John Schneider. And for National League, I'm going to switch Craig Counsell to Pat Murphy because after we talked the past couple of weeks and maybe even months, it's just pretty incredible that they won 97 games with that roster again.
Yeah, John Schneider in the AL for me. Blue Jays roster, I think, is worse than the Mariners roster, and they still won more games. So that goes to John Schneider there. Also in a tougher division, I'd say. And then Pat Murphy in the NL, I think deserves it. I think you can make a case for Terry Francona as well, too, who I picked in the preseason for them making the playoffs. But I think Pat Murphy is, solid choice there. Reliever of the year.
Yeah, I think Munoz from Seattle has a slight win over Aroldis Chapman, even though he was awesome this year. And then clearly Edwin Diaz after some of the San Diego guys lose their innings with the trades over in the National League.
I go Aroldis Chapman from the AL. I think he had his best season as a big leaguer, and that's pretty ridiculous to say. So I think he deserves it there. And then I did go Edwin Diaz as well, too, in the NL. Despite the choke from the Mets, he was not the issue. So Edwin Diaz gets the NL Reliever of the Year. On to Rookie of the Year, always a fun reward.
Yeah, I think Nick Kurtz and Cade Horton both finished very strong. So I'm going to keep them there. I think we both had them one or two for the past couple months now.
Nick Kurtz, obvious Rookie of the Year in the AL. And NL, a bit less obvious. I went with Drake Baldwin as my choice. I think he had a great year as a catcher for the Braves and was probably the biggest positive on that team. So I think Drake Baldwin does enough to get the award for me. On to Cy Young.
Yeah, even though our guys Crochet and a guy I was really fighting for this year, Zach Wheeler, put up their fights, it's got to be Skubal and Skeens. Literally untouchable other than a few instances this season from those two guys.
Yeah, Skubal and Skeens, my choices as well, too. Two of the most dominant pitchers that we've seen in a while. And as we know, the Cy Young Award is usually an award that you win once and fizzle off, or you win multiple times and you're there every single year for a 10-year stretch. And Scooble is starting to get to that level. Skeens feels like he's going to be on that level. Uh, it's pretty ridiculous to see from those two guys. And outside of that rough performance against the A's for Skeens, or not Skeens, for Scooble, even though he only had one run in that outing,
Yeah.
very dominant year for both those guys. Before we get to the AL MVP, we'll go to the NL MVP. We'll do that separately.
Yeah, that's going to be Shohei Ohtani. 55 homers, sub-3 ERA on the mound. Just incredible. I mean, this is probably the greatest player of all time. So I'm just trying to take it step by step whenever I'm watching the Dodgers this year. Even though I hate them, I got to remember that like this is literally Babe Ruth we're watching right now.
Yeah, Shohei Ohtani, the best player we will ever see with our own two eyes. He's ridiculous. Top tier pitcher, top tier hitter. I know Phillies fans want Kyle Schwarber to win this award, but fuck no, dude. Like, fuck no. There's zero chance because all that Kyle Schwarber does as a hitter, Shohei Ohtani is also doing as a pitcher, which is ridiculous. So Shohei NL MVP. And that brings us to our most contested award, of course, the AL MVP. We know it's between two candidates, Cal Raleigh and Aaron Judge. Who was your pick?
I think Aaron Judge is going to win, but I didn't pick him. I picked Cal Raleigh. This is the best catcher season we've ever seen, ever. Any decade, any era. And this was also the best switch hitter season since Mickey Mantle. I feel like I have to do it. I think Aaron Judge is going to win. It's hard to blame people who vote for him because he just won the batting title as a straight up power hitter for most of his career. Incredible. He's up there with Babe Ruth now too. But so is Cal Raleigh because he had 60 homers this season as a catcher. So I'm picking Cal.
Yeah, crazy year. Both these dudes deserve it. If they could do a co-MVP, they would probably do it here. But Aaron Judge had the better offensive season. I think that's the better full season WAR-wise. One of the most unique offensive hitters that we've ever seen. Leads in every offensive category except for homers and RBIs. Wins the batting title as a power hitter. It's the most homers that we've ever seen from a batting title hitter or a batting title winner in MLB history, I believe. But one thing that the WAR doesn't account for is how hard it is to play the catcher position and how big of a grind that is on your body. And what it means to, be in double meetings for the pitchers and the hitters, to handle perhaps the best pitching staff of all of baseball. It's just something that the stats can't measure. And even for me as a guy who relies on stats so heavily to make my picks now, Cal Raleigh is the guy for me because I think when it comes down to the most valuable, I mean, it's not saying Aaron Judge isn't valuable, but Cal Raleigh just is that little share more this season. And will Cal Raleigh go back to, hitting 35 homers and 100 RBIs and 4 WAR season after this? Maybe. Who knows? And will Aaron Judge probably keep producing at this rate that he usually is? Honestly, yeah, probably. But Cal Raleigh's my pick here. It's not because voter fatigue from Aaron Judge. I just think this season, this time, Cal Raleigh was more valuable than Aaron Judge, and WAR just can't explain that for me.
This was the year of Cal Raleigh, in my opinion.
Yeah. Moving on to the playoffs, which is amazing. We know the bracket, we know the teams, and we're doing the podcast today because of the MLB playoffs starting tomorrow at 10 a.m. We didn't want to get into a weird spot where we have before of, the wild card series is halfway over by the time that we start doing our episode. So we're doing it today. Starting off in the AL, we'll go all the way through the AL, get our World Series pick for who's going to be there, and then we'll go to the NL and start back doing our thing because it's a bit easier to track that way. So the AL wildcard series is Detroit versus Cleveland and Boston versus New York, 2 divisional matchups. Who are your picks for those series?
I got Cleveland over Detroit in 3 games. The Guardians are one of the few teams that can get in the head of an ace like Tarek Skubal, and you just can't really explain the kind of momentum they're bringing into this series. And I guess specifically after they beat him up so good on the road last week, I have to take Cleveland at home. Let me go to the next one.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So yeah, Boston, New York, man. Once again, this is going to be an epic series. And I got Boston winning in 3 here too on the road. History repeats itself again. They split a 4-gamer the last time they played in Yankee Stadium. So I think we do see 3 games again. The Yankees are on an absolute heater, and it looks like no Roman Anthony for Boston. But there's something about this Boston team that gives me kind of Atlanta vibes when they went on their run without Acuna. I'm going to bet on Boston's pitching to come through on the road, win this one in 3 games.
I'll start off Detroit, Cleveland. Game one tomorrow, 10 a.m. It's so crazy that playoff games are 10 a.m. Give me the Tigers in that first game. Skubal is the one guy I think in this league that you can face 50 times over and over again, as this Cleveland team has, and still not find a way to do anything against them. I think we saw that when they played them last week, even though the Guardians came back and won that game. Complete fluky game, 3 runs in an inning without the ball leaving the infield. I think the Tigers get them in that game. Game 2, TBD versus Tanner Bybee, and then game 3, TBD versus Slade Ciccone. Just complete Tigers-esque.
Yeah.
We're going to fucking throw the whole kitchen sink at you, and you're going to try to figure it out. I like the Tigers' chances to get one of those 2 games. I don't know which one, but I have the Tigers winning in 3 there. The other series, Yankees-Boston, the rivalry in baseball, and we are treated in game 1. Crochet versus Max Fried, going to be such a fun game 1. I don't know who the fuck is going to take that game. That's such a crazy game, to be honest with you, pitching-wise. But I would not be shocked if the Red Sox take that. Regardless, whoever loses game 1 will win game 2. Rodon versus Bayo in that one, I think, leans a bit more to the Yankees. So maybe even more crucial for the Red Sox to win game 1 there. Game 3, Red Sox have not announced a starter. Could be Giolito, maybe.
He's out.
I don't know if they.
Giolito's out, elbow.
I guess he is out.
Yeah.
But I don't know who they lean there. Could be a Toldy, could be something like that, which would be fun as hell because of Peyton Toldy versus Cam Schlitter.
Yeah.
That's going to be a fun matchup. I love that the Yankees are giving Schlitter that opportunity to pitch in that big game. And I do think the Yankees win that one because it's at home in the Bronx. So I have the Yankees in 3, Detroit, and the Yankees moving on for me, Cleveland, and Boston moving on for
Every year we do this.
So we'll move to the ALDS. You have Cleveland versus Seattle and Boston versus Toronto.
Yeah. So, however this AL Central series goes, I think Seattle draws a pretty good side of the bracket here, avoiding Yankees and Boston. So I am going to have Seattle beating Cleveland in 5 games, a home series against a struggling offense. However side you want to put it, Cleveland or Detroit, I think Seattle has a very good matchup with their pitching staff in this one. So I'm going to take them in 5. My other series, Boston goes to Toronto, and they're going to beat them in 4. Boston put up a ton of runs on Toronto this month. And just to be honest, I don't know how Toronto is going to look in this environment coming back here for the first time in a while. If the Yankees were here, I think they might sweep them, but I'm going to give Boston the win in a way closer series against Toronto. So Seattle and Boston to the ALCS for me.
All right. I have Detroit versus Seattle. If Skubal pitches tomorrow, I think there's a good chance that we see him still on Saturday. Should be short rest. It would only be a 3-day rest, but I mean, Tariq Skubal is going to be the guy that you would believe to do that. And if he starts game 1, that will likely mean he starts game 4 on Wednesday, which will give him another 3-day rest period. But I think he'll, again, be able to push through that. The thing about the Mariners, though, is they are one of the few unique teams in the MLB that can match a Tariq Skubal in Logan Gilbert. And we just don't see a lot of teams that can do that. Mm-hmm. And outside of Logan Gilbert, the Mariners still have Brian Wu. They still have Luis Castillo. They still have George Kirby, who struggled, and Bryce Miller as well, too. And a strong back end of the bullpen and a solid, better lineup than the Tigers. So I have Seattle in 4. Whether that's game 1 or game 4, or it can't be game 4 that the Tigers win. Maybe they get game 1, but regardless, I think Seattle wins in 4 games and wins the series against the Tigers. Yankees versus Toronto for me. Toronto had the upper edge in the regular season. I'm so excited to see the Rogers Center pumping in October. Just so nostalgic for me. And this has been a series this whole year where it feels like the Blue Jays have the worse roster than the Yankees, but find a way to get in their head or just do what they need to do to win. I think having 3 of those 5 games at home is going to be huge for Toronto. I think it's the difference as Toronto wins the series in 5 games, which sets up Seattle versus Toronto for being in the ALCS. Go ahead and predict your representative in the World Series
Yeah.
for the AL.
So I've got Seattle and Boston. Just really ridiculous matchup to think about, just going back and thinking about the history of baseball in the 2000s, because this series we find out just how cursed Seattle really is. This is the furthest they've gotten since 2001. And like I said earlier, maybe the best case scenario for them in the entire bracket, because the Yankees beat Boston, and the Yankees, if they're facing Seattle in the series, they probably end up destroying them just like they did in 2001. But that's not the case here. Seattle has all of the requirements for a World Series run. They have a great rotation, an MVP candidate, big time rental bats, an elite closer. I have Seattle beating Boston in 7. My MVP of the ALCS is Randy Arozarena once again. Guys who rake in the postseason don't really lose that touch. I feel like it's more about intangibles when we're talking October baseball. So that's why I got Seattle back, even if they might be cursed. The Cubs were cursed, and they found a way into the World Series. So I'm going to say the same thing happens to Seattle here, because things are just clicking at the perfect time for them. And in my scenario, they get the easier matchup.
My LCS is Seattle versus Toronto. Would be a fun series. We saw this as a wild card series, the first year that they did the wild cards in 2022, I believe that was. Seattle won both those games and then got swept by Houston. Regardless, Seattle has every edge on this Toronto team. They have the better lineup. They have the better rotation. They have the better bullpen. And that's enough, man. Like, you don't need anything else to go win a series. And I think Seattle does. They do that in 6 games. Series MVP, I'll give it to Cal Raleigh. He had a big game in Toronto in that wild card series. I think it comes back here as well, too, for him having a big series against the Blue Jays in this one. Fun thing to see would be the environments for those stadiums during that series, because it's always a big thing when the Blue Jays come to Seattle that all the Vancouver fans that are Blue Jay fans go down to Seattle and pack the house for that one. I would not be shocked if it's like a 50-50 split for that game, unless they do some weird ticket sectioning off where you can't buy tickets in Canada or something like that, which we've seen before. But who knows? I have Seattle in 6 games in that series, and I have Seattle going to the World Series, much like you do. On to the NL side of the bracket, starting off with the wild card, of course. Cincinnati at the Dodgers, which is like David versus Goliath, and then San Diego versus the Cubs, which is a phenomenal series versus 2 pretty polar opposite squads.
Yeah, I am going to take the Dodgers sweep here, but I am really excited to watch Hunter Green pitch game 1 against the Dodgers. Just outside of that, I think Cincinnati's going to need a lot of help from Tanner Scott if they want to score any sort of late inning run against LA. So I am going to go with the 2-0 for the Dodgers. On the other side, though, San Diego goes to Chicago. I just can't pick the Cubs. I got San Diego in 3. I have no idea who's going to pitch for them. Cade Horton is now out, which is just really fucked up, man. I was really hoping we got to see him, but the Padres have a very filthy bullpen compared to Chicago, and they might have to throw some bullpen games themselves. And I'm just going to take San Diego when it comes to the bullpen matchup like that.
I'll start Cincinnati versus the Dodgers. That first game 1, Hunter Green versus Blake Snell, might be my favorite game 1. That's going to be a fun game. Hunter Green's been so good. Blake Snell's been so good when he's healthy. And even if the Reds take that game, I think they lose the next 2, regardless. but I do have the Dodgers taking game one as well too. So I do think it's Dodgers in two there. If they take down the Dodgers, I mean it's going to be ridiculous. Probably one of the biggest upsets that we've seen in a long time, and that will be playoffs. And it's possible. That's what's so good about baseball. But
Yeah.
I do have the Dodgers in two. Then for the other series, San Diego going to Chicago. I wish the series was in San Diego. I just think it'd be a bit more fun environment. But seeing postseason games in Wrigley is still awesome. Pavetta versus Matt Boyd in game one just doesn't have the feel of like that bona fide postseason matchup, even though both these guys have been amazing this year. Cease versus TBD for the Cubs in game two, and then Yu Darvish versus TBD for the Cubs game three. Probably Shota starting game two, I
just
would
got
imagine.
rocked.
But you would expect him and Tyon or who knows for that third guy. Regardless, I have San Diego in two. I think San Diego does a good enough job to slow down the Cubs offense, which has kind of been struggling at some points this year, even though they've also been amazing at some points this year. The bullpen from San Diego is good enough to do it as well, too. They don't have to worry about a rough start because they have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 inning guys that you can run out there every single day and feel okay with in a playoff format. And I think they're built super well for this playoff. So I have the Cubs losing in two games here, getting swept by the Padres, which sets up the NLDS, the Dodgers versus the Phillies, and the Padres versus Milwaukee. We have the same matchups here. We'll start off with probably the bigger one, the Dodgers versus the Phillies, two big market teams that do not like each other. What do you think here?
I want to pick Philly so bad. And I've told you before, I think they looked better than the Dodgers in the regular season, but these injuries are going to catch up to them. Whether it's not having Zach Wheeler for game one, whether it's Trey Turner just missing too much time this year, the Dodgers were built for this series. I think they're going to make things interesting for us. So I got the Dodgers in 5, but it's another situation here where if you don't trust. Oh, God damn it, man. They're at home, though. Nope, I can't do it. Dodgers in 5. I'm not going to talk myself out of it, Kyle.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how the Dodgers do Shohei here as far as starting. Is he going to start game two in the wild card series? Are they going to try to hold him out for a game three? Or who knows there?
I heard their potential wild card 3 or game 1 of this series.
Yeah, regardless,
Yeah.
he'll be pitching if they need him to. And even if he doesn't pitch, Emmett Sheehan is a pretty good consolation fifth starter behind Blake Snell, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, and Tyler Glasnow. Philly, I want to pick them. And I know the rotation is still good with Christopher Sanchez, Ranger Suarez, Jesus Luzardo, but not having Zach Wheeler is what's going to do it from here. I have the Dodgers in 4 games, moving on to the NLCS. The San Diego Padres versus the number 1 seed of Milwaukee Brewers, obviously at home for Milwaukee to start this. Starting pitching, I don't necessarily love for the Padres. I don't think it's their strength. The bullpen is, but I also don't think the Brewers are much better than them in the starting pitching aspect or the back end of the bullpen aspect or the lineup either. So I have the Padres winning in a shocking 3-game sweep of the Brewers here. We've seen this from the Brewers before. They're usually just not built for the playoffs. You know, that could change this year. Who knows? Like, it's happened before where I picked teams to get out in the first round and then win the World Series. So could be happening here, but I have the Padres winning in 3 games, setting up a San Diego versus Los Angeles NLCS for me.
All right. Yeah, on the same page with you here. I'm taking San Diego just because they're much better in one-run games. They're really good in extra innings. We saw in their head-to-head matchup and from the statistics too. The San Diego Bats are also on fire right now. Maybe it's because they just played Arizona, but you would imagine if they beat up on the Cubbies, they're going to bring that into this series. So I'm going to have another 5-gamer here, not quite as bold as yours, but I still like San Diego. So San Diego and the Dodgers.
Give me the NLCS. What do you got?
I would love to take San Diego again here, but at some point their depth is going to catch up to them compared to teams like Philly and LA. Of course, you just can't have you Darvish throwing meaningful innings and JP Sears because these are going to be the most important innings of the season, and that's when the Dodgers strike. So I'm going to take the Dodgers in 6. My MVP is going to be Dalton Rushing. It sounds like there's no Will Smith at all right now, and they can't afford to play Ben Rotvit because Dalton Rushing has really turned it on in September. He's going to get some big ABs. San Diego's got a lot of right-handers. You're looking at me like I'm crazy, but I feel like it's one of two guys that win these awards. It's either the veteran who's done it before or the young guy that's going to kick off his excellent career.
Yeah, I wasn't laughing. I like Dalton Rushing.
Okay.
I actually think he's going to be really good in the league. It's crazy to hear those words coming out of your mouth when there's all these other guys on that team.
I know, right?
I have the same matchup, San Diego versus LA. And the only shitty thing I think about the San Diego Padres bullpen is that when you rely on them so much in a 7-game series, they're bound to blow up for you once. And the Dodgers can match you in so many different ways that I think it's just so hard to be mistake-free for that long against this Dodgers team that has notoriously been able to fuck you up. I know they didn't do it in the playoff series a couple years ago, but they got you last year, and that's the newest thing for it, and they played pretty well against them this year. So I have the Dodgers in 7, and I'm not going to beat around the bush here. Shohei Ohtani, MVP, because he probably hits a couple homers, probably starts a couple games, and from the Dalton Rushing aspect, I think he needs to hit like 5 homers for that to be happening. And I if that happens, so be it. I'm so down for that. I think him and Alex Freeland are fun players. I know Freeland's probably not going to be on the roster for this, but I like them in the long-term future. I just don't think in the short-term impact it's going to be possible for him to do enough to outlast Shohei Ohtani when it comes to production in the series.
Sure.
And even if Dalton Rushing hits 5 homers and does all this stuff, if Shohei hits 2 homers and pitches 2 games, the voters are going to freak out and do all that stuff for him. But the World Series, we both have Seattle versus the Dodgers, which we had the same matchup preseason. We had the Red Sox versus the Dodgers for both of us. Just kind of shows that the AL is a bit more open than the NL, it feels. What do you think? Who's the World Series winner? Who's the World Series MVP, Skyler? Let me know.
Yeah, going back to your point, I guess I'm just a little more confident in Seattle's pitching staff to last this long through the season. I feel like Boston's going to explode at some point, and that's why they don't go to the World Series. But long story short, I don't think Seattle's cursed. I think they could definitely get to the World Series. I think this is one of their best teams ever. But does anyone out there really believe that Ohtani isn't going to redeem himself after last year's World Series? I don't think so. You already mentioned it. He's going to homer a bunch of times. He's going to throw a couple absolute gems in the postseason. And my prediction is just that best start is going to come in the World Series. He's thrown shutout after getting his control back this season. And I think the star power of LA is just going to be way too much for whoever finds their way out of the American League for the second year in a row now. So I'm going to take the Dodgers in 6 over Seattle. And of course, Shohei Ohtani is going to get that MVP for the World Series.
Yeah. Seattle, LA World Series. Actually, these teams played yesterday, so that's kind of cool there. In this case, the Dodgers would be the home team to have the series because they had the better regular season win percentage. I think it'd be a really cool World Series because it's West Coast. There is no traveling to the East Coast, none of that shit. We stay on the West Coast, which would be really cool for us on this side of the country to kind of just like give an FU to the East Coast. This Dodgers rotation, when you're seeing it, is probably the only team that can stack up with Seattle when it comes down to it. Because if it's Snell, Shohei, Yoshinobu, Glasnow, and then Sheenan if you need some extra innings somewhere, I think that's better than what Seattle has. Also, once we get to the World Series, you're not seeing Shohei limited by anything. This is If you need 100 pitches from Shohei, you're going to get 100 pitches from
This is why they
Shohei.
paid him.
And that's a freaky thought when you realize that guy is hitting first for them as well, too, and hitting 50 homers in a season. I have the Dodgers in 6. I think they can match that rotation set from Seattle. I think they can match the lineup set by Seattle as well, too. And even though it feels like it'd be easy to manage these two teams, I think the chess work between Wilson and Dave Roberts is going to be really fun to watch in this series, because there's a lot of good matchups that you already have that you want to turn into great matchups with certain relievers and whatnot, and moving the base runners and all that stuff. So I would love to see this series. I think it'd be good for baseball. It'd be great for the West Coast. And it would be great for the Dodgers because they're going to win in 6 games with this World Series MVP also going to Shohei Ohtani. I just can't pick anybody else that's going to have his usage, if you want to call it that. He's got the backfield to himself when it
Russell
comes
Westbrook.
to that. As far as exactly, he's got all the opportunities he needs to go ahead and win that award. So give me the Dodgers and Shohei Ohtani to win in 6 games, becoming back-to-back World Series champs. The first team in 25 years, 27 years, something like that. It was the Yankees. I just forget what years it was.
97, 98.
Something like that. Yeah. Anyways, moving on to some college football.
I just figured we're not going to be talking about football for another 8 days, so we might as well talk about some of the big games coming up. Just a couple of them. It's not quite the slate of week 5, but still some good ones. We'll start off with the Boise State Broncos, because they're going to a struggling number 21 ranked Notre Dame next week. And of course, the Broncos are 20-point dogs. They're much worse without Ashton Genty. Their offensive coordinator, Dirk Cutter, left. But hey, crazier things have happened. Kellen Moore went into Georgia and beat the snot out of them one year. So of course, I'm going to be watching my guys. The other game at 12:30, though, is going to be the most watched game of the week. It's number 16 Vandy going to number 10 Alabama. Vandy's been really exciting this year. Pavia, he's making a case for that New York City invitation. But Bama's coming off a massive win at Georgia. Ty Simpson has an absolute cannon. 11 points seems a little heavy to cover the spread for Bama, but I'm not sure Kalen DeBoer can afford to lose to them twice. I don't think it's going to happen. Similar to Shohei with the World Series, I just think Alabama's going to refuse to lose again. And then at 4:30, another battle for Florida. Number 3, Miami. They go to Doak Walker Stadium. They take on an FSU team that just had an embarrassing loss to Virginia. So this should be an absolute dogfight from the Seminoles. But I am leaning Miami 4.5. If Carson Beck can pull this one out, I think Miami does go undefeated. They don't have Clemson on the schedule this year. So this is a massive game for the ACC. And I didn't have a Heisman watch. Just figured so much baseball today. There's no need to break down college football. We'll wait another week. They're not going anywhere on us. And maybe a mock draft next week too, especially if the Jets and the Raiders lose again. It'd be perfect for us.
Although it wouldn't be perfect for us. We need some wins at some point. But
I agree.
Doing our layups pool predictions from last week, it was a decent week. We went 2 for 4, but both of our layups missed. I had the Chargers -6.5 versus the Giants. Jackson Dart outplayed Justin Herbert, and I did not expect to see that, so I'm content with taking that loss. Skyler had number 25 BYU -6.5 at Colorado. I did not actually see how that game went.
BYU won, but they just killed the last 10 minutes of the game. They weren't interested in scoring touchdowns. They only won by 3. So good for them, but they didn't cover.
Okay. This week, I have the New York Giants money line. They're going to New Orleans, who just had a decent showing against Buffalo. Although I think the Giants are going to do enough here to get a victory. They're currently dogs by 1.5 points or something like that. So you're not seeing, a huge, big underdog here for the Giants, but right around plus money, just under that. And I think that's good enough for a pick here with the Giants getting their second win back to back.
I'm going with the opposite strategy here. I got the Chargers -2.5 against Washington. Jaden Daniels could be back for this one, but like we've talked about before, if it's your first major knee injury in the NFL, especially at quarterback, bro, Washington has learned their lesson after last time. Do not play the dude if he's not ready. So I think the Chargers bounce back big against Washington -2.5.
Well, predictions last week were good for us. I had the Jacksonville Jaguars +145 versus the Niners. That ended up hitting, of course, when they just kind of dominated Brock Purdy. Skyler had Kansas City over Baltimore. Home dog. Kansas City usually tends to be a good thing when you're betting on them. So good job on Skyler there. This week, I have the Bucks going into Seattle and getting the victory. They're +160. I think if Tampa Bay doesn't get that punt blocked last week, they win that game against the Eagles. I think the Eagles are a way better team than the Seahawks, who showed some definitely questionable moments against the Arizona Cardinals, who I do not have a lot of faith in. So I have Tampa Bay getting the victory, +160 on the road next Sunday.
I made sure to throw in a college pick here for my bold prediction this week. I like to flip them every other week. I'm going to take surprisingly, a big ACC matchup these days. Cal Duke, new rivalry, I guess. Darian Mensah has been playing pretty good for Duke, but I got Cal at home +115. Cal's offense is humming right now. They got a true freshman quarterback from Hawaii. If you haven't watched Jaren Kiawe Saga Polo I know it's crazy, but this guy's a true freshman lefty, and he's got the arm of an NFL quarterback. It is insane to watch. Like this, you know, I won't go out and say that he's a better prospect than Tua yet, but I think he has a better arm. This guy's got an absolute cannon. He's super fun to watch, and I got him beating Duke.
Yeah, he definitely has that Tua aspect. I was seeing some of his throws he made this past week. And he just, I guess that's just kind of lefties doing their own stuff. Undersized lefty quarterbacks.
Yeah.
There's not a ton of comparisons there. But the Tua one definitely does fit. Regardless, that's going to do it for episode 263. Next week, 264, we'll get back to the NFL. We'll know a whole lot more about the MLB playoffs and who's still alive. We'll know more about the Heisman. We'll know more about the NBA and some of the other stuff that's going on there as they start to kind of get back into the swing of things. And any closing thoughts?
Jonathan Kuminga, please come home. You may not play the whole season, I understand, but we need you to come home so we can fix our cap space situation, man. Just stop holding
Gary,
out,
come
please.
home. Yeah.
Hey, let's go Jets tonight. Everybody hates the Dolphins, right? Not just me?
I hate them. I'm okay with them.
All right, maybe just me.
Today, I'm okay with them sucking. I'm good with that.
All right, bet. We'll see you guys in 8 days. We'll be halfway through the DS, so we'll definitely have a lot to talk about, Kyle.
Yeah.
All right, see you next time.